Instead of focusing on winning arguments, we're teaching the basic fundamentals of sales and marketing and how we can use them to win in the world of politics, teaching you how to meet people where they're at on the issues they care about. Welcome to The Brian Nichols Show. Well, hey there, folks. Brian Nichols here on The Brian Nichols Show, and thank you for joining us on, of course, another fun-filled episode. I'm back. I'm back in studio after my long summer vacation there, 2 weeks out of office. It was far too long, but I definitely enjoyed it. Brian Nichols here on The Brian Nichols Show, your humble host, joining you, yes, from our lovely Cardio Miracle Studios here in Eastern Indiana. Now, if you want to learn more about Cardio Miracle and why they have been a studio sponsor here for the show well over a year, stick around. We're going to talk about how you can, on top of listening to the Brian Nichols Show, also improve your heart health by checking out Cardio Miracle, lower your blood pressure, help improve those restless nights of sleep. Stick around. We'll talk about that later. Also, the Brian Nichols Show is powered by our phenomenal sponsors, AMP America. Very excited to be part of the AMP America family. Folks, if you're looking for the news you need to know without all the corporate media bias and fluff, head to ampamerica.com. We have news pieces, articles, opinion pieces, podcasts, and more. So one more time, ampamerica.com. And dare I say, folks, we're telling some pretty cool stories over at AMP America. Also, yes, elephant in the room, the topic of conversation today. Why is storytelling so important, not just for storytellers, but folks in business, thought leaders, and beyond? So to discuss that and more, joining us from Talk Boutique is Andrea Sampson. Andrea, welcome to the Brian Nichols Show. How you doing?
I'm great, Brian. Thanks so much for having me. You've got such high energy. I'm going to have to amp myself up a little bit.
I guess that's why AMP America is our sponsor here. But no, thank you for joining us, Andrea. Really looking forward to today's conversation because storytelling, right? We talk about this not just in the world of sales and business, but also in the world of politics, in the world of thought leadership. Storytelling is so important when you're trying to take sometimes very complex ideas, or dare I say, not so exciting ideas, and bringing it to your average person, showing why it's important, but more importantly, helping really paint a picture, right? Why you're not just telling the story, but what the call to action is for the audience, either something to learn or something to take away and do something with that story. But I'm putting the cart before the horse. Andrea, do us a favor. Would you please tell us your background in terms of why storytelling is so important to you, why you focus on storytelling when you're talking to thought leaders and business leaders, and how you found yourself in this world of focusing on storytelling?
Sure. Well, I spent most of my career in advertising, and, advertising is a storytelling medium. But here was the thing. I never really thought of myself as a storyteller in those days. It really wasn't until I found myself actually volunteering as a speaker's coach for TEDx Toronto. And, didn't know what a speaker's coach was, but here I was taking this skill that I had in advertising. I was a senior strategist. My job was to help to be the voice of the consumer. So I was a strategist and a planner. So what I would do was I lived between the client and our creative teams, and I would build the underpinnings of the campaigns that you see in market. Well, in order to do that, I would have to take large swatches of data, like all kinds of information, and synthesize it down to a single consumer insight. And that insight is what we would build campaigns upon. Well, when you think about a TED speaker, I started working with these people, scientists, academics, technologists, artists, people who have really complex information. But that complex information is actually shifting the future that we're going to be living, all of us. But we don't speak their language. They speak science or technology. And so we don't understand what they're doing. And we trust our news professionals or others to translate for them. Well, and we know what that looks like. It's not always true or fully true, or perhaps it's a bit biased. And so what I had to do as a speaker's coach working with these individuals was to help them take their entire life's work and bring it down to one core idea and then put it out there in 15 minutes or less, because that's what a TED Talk is. And so in order to do that, story is essential. Why? You started off by saying, yes, it decodes, it creates an understanding of complex information. But equally as important, what it actually does is it creates context and connection. It actually lights up our brain. Storytelling is a powerful medium that we as humans are hardwired for. And so when we hear a story, we lean in. Our brain does these really amazing things. It starts lighting up and it starts filling in your story with my memories.
Mm.
And we start living the story along with it. And when that story leads to a core idea, that is where the magic happens, because suddenly this whole thing that we've been living along with the storyteller has meaning, has context. And now the thing that they wanted us to understand, not only do we get it, but we feel it, because that's what stories do. They light us up emotionally. And now we're leaning in and we really want to do something with that. Because when we emotionally connect with a story, we want to tell somebody else. And therein lies the basis of ideas worth sharing, which is, of course, the tagline of TED. And so, when I learned that I had this skill, I didn't know I had this skill, which was to take somebody's life work and turn it into an idea. But I had been training my entire career for it. And so I opened Talk Boutique with the intention of helping experts and change makers become storytellers so that their life-changing work, their future-changing work could be understood by all of us. And we could start to understand that the future is not as bad as we're being told, because there are some really smart and really good people who are working on making changes that we all need to know about. And so hence we love TED Talks, but we love stories even more.
So I'm going to make this real by telling a story. How about that? For my day job, right? I'm not a podcast host by trade, though that would definitely be a lot more fun, probably. No, I'm just teasing. I love my job. I love helping do sales and marketing for these businesses that I work with. And for my day job, one of the businesses I've been working with, they are a contact center company. So when you call into your favorite organization, Nike, Adidas, whoever it may be, and you get that, press 1 for English, press 2 for Spanish, and then do you go through a robot voice, or you get a live person, right? The technology behind the scenes. That's what the company I'm working with, that's what they do. And we talk about this when I'm talking to new sales folks. We have to be buzzword certified, which means if you're in this industry, it's called CCaaS, right? CCAAS, Contact Center as a Service, as a software. You're talking about IVRs, IVAs, all these different acronyms that mean nothing to your average person, but to us, it means something, right? Mm-hmm. And when we sat down, we were doing a big rebrand here at the beginning of the year. We had to take the buzzwords and turn it into meaning. And we actually did just what you're talking about, taking an entire company that was very well established and saying, we're going to the office space. What would you say you do here, right? And when you sat down and we figured it out, we said, we're not going to go in and change the environment by creating brand new technology that's game changing. But what we're going to do is we're going to create contact centers that people love, or at least don't hate as much. And that right there, right? That presents an emotional connection that I can say that to every single person. I know you can see you right now, Andrea, you're nodding in agreement, because we've all been on the phone 30, 40, 50 minutes just waiting for someone. Please help me out here. I had one guy I interviewed for another podcast. He was on hold for over 20 hours. 20 hours. Like the fact that he kept his phone. Right. He kept his phone next to his bedside when he went to bed at night. Like that it blew me away. And when I talked to him and I say, we're creating contact centers that people love, or at least don't hate as much, he smiled and he laughed and he told me his story. So I think right there, Andrea, you're painting such an important picture for the audience to take away today, whether you're in politics, you're in business, you're a thought leader, or just you're an average, everyday, normal person, right? If you want to take your ideas, no matter what they are or how passionate you are about them, and actually get people to care, going back to the intro of the show, you got to meet people where they're at on the issues they care about. And why not do the storytelling to help paint the picture more pretty, I guess, right?
Yeah. And so, fun fact, I worked for a contact call center many, many years ago. I was an account manager at a contact call center early on in my career. So I know your business actually pretty well. And funnily, it was in the days just as technology was coming in. And so I used to actually have to write the specs for the custom software that we were building. Because in those days, we didn't have all the databases. We were building it. So anyways, that's a million years ago now. But, coming back to what you were just saying, yes, creating that connection is absolutely essential in terms of building the story so that people understand it, so that they connect. I mean, the story you just told, call centers that people love, or at least don't hate as much. What's great about that is it evokes an emotion right away. So we get it, right? Because we all have had an experience in some way, shape, or form. But also, telling the story through the lens of your own personal experience, or the personal experience of the guy who was on the line for 20 hours. What we're doing is we're getting to know each other on a personal level in a business context. And what that does is it takes us out of the suit and tie or the armor that we wear, right? Because unfortunately, when we meet each other as business people, and especially in sales and marketing, we're suddenly in this place of separation. You're trying to sell me something. You're trying to pull the wool over my eyes. And so I don't trust you because I believe you've got an ulterior motive. You're trying to sell me something. Well, what story does is it equalizes us. It normalizes us. Now, what I've done is I've told you a little bit about me. I just told you backstory. I worked in a call center. You know a little bit more about me. You might want to know more. And now suddenly it's like, well, we're on common ground, or to some degree. And so now we've got something to talk about, and we can trust each other on that level. And if we can trust each other on that level, maybe we can trust each other on another level. So stories help us bring the vulnerable human into an arena where the vulnerable human doesn't often want to play, but it's safe to do it through story. And then our ideas become something that we can share with a level of confidence that that other person isn't going to take them away from us or belittle them, or because now there's context and there's real vulnerability along with it. There's a human there. It's not just some sales guy who's trying to sell me something. It's Brian who, has spent his career doing this and really cares about it and believes that he's servicing, not selling. Now I see something different.
Hey folks, I want to take a moment to talk about something that has truly changed my life, and that is Cardio Miracle, our incredible studio sponsor. Now, I'll be honest, when I first heard about Cardio Miracle and their claims about improving heart health, I was skeptical. But after using it for just about 2 months, I was absolutely blown away by the results. First, my blood pressure went from being consistently around 140/90 to a much more healthier and manageable 120/80. And my resting heart rate dropped from the low 70s to the high 50s. And I couldn't believe it. But the benefits didn't stop there. I started sleeping better, and I felt more energized at the gym, and my heart felt the best it's felt in years. And it's not just me. Hundreds of you, our amazing listeners, have reached out to share your own incredible experiences with Cardio Miracle. So, what is Cardio Miracle, and how does it work? It's a carefully crafted supplement that harnesses the power of nitric oxide to support optimal heart function. So by increasing nitric oxide levels in your blood, Cardio Miracle helps relax your blood vessels, improve circulation, and it protects your heart from damage. It's like giving your heart the support it needs to function at its best. And here's the best part. We've got an exclusive offer just for you, our loyal listeners here at the Brian Nichols Show. When you head over to cardiomiracle.com and use code TBNS at checkout, you'll get an extra 15% discount on your order. Plus, with their 100% money-back guarantee, you've got nothing to lose and everything to gain. So, if you're ready to take control of your heart health and experience the life-changing benefits of Cardio Miracle for yourself, just click the link in the show notes or video description. Trust me, your heart will thank you. And don't wait another day to prioritize your health.
Join the tens of thousands of folks who have already discovered the Cardio Miracle difference. Head to cardiomiracle.com now and use code TBNS for 15% off your order. Your journey to a happier and healthier heart starts today. And now, let's get back to the show.
I had Victor Antonio on the show back 2-3 years ago. He's very much in the world of sales. He's a big influencer, and he's around the idea of finding the why behind why people buy. And one of the things he consistently promotes is stop selling, start helping. And I gotta say, Andrea, that's been one of the things over the past few years. I've internalized that, and I've added a little bit to it where you're helping, but you're also creating value, right? And I think it's so important to not just help and create value, but specifically to understand who you're helping and how you're creating value for that person. So when we're storytelling, how should we look at the audience that we're speaking to and be able to tailor a story so it more impacts the actual emotional triggers in our audience versus just I'm going to use the word generic story that we maybe tell. You can tell that story to the Chamber of Commerce. You can tell this story to the Lunch and Learn, right? How do we make it so it's more hyper personalized to really get the most out of storytelling?
Well, I think, if I think back to my days in advertising, we used to tell case studies all the time, right? And a case study is a story. Sure it is. But it's not a very good story because really it goes, what was the problem? What was the impact of that problem? What solution did we employ? And what was the outcome? That's kind of, first of all, right away, you can see that framework is really pretty staid. It sets you up as an expert, yes, except none of us are really experts because the reality is we don't know everything. And even that story is not going to really, tell the story that somebody else needs. So when we tell stories, what we want to do is a couple of things. First of all, use emotional language. Really, really important. Why? Because our brain loves emotional language. And what we want is to light up our brains. So our brains we have sensory cortices within our brains: sight, sound, touch, taste. So use language that actually lights up one of those cortices. So I'll give you an example, and you just feel this. So if I were to say to you, he has rough hands, that's just a fact. Yep. Okay. Now I'm just going to add one word, and I want you to feel the difference on this. He has rough, leathery hands.
There it is. Yep.
There's a story in leathery, right?
Hard work. You've been spending time laboring. Yeah, exactly.
See what you did, what your brain did, and did you notice how it felt differently in your body too? Right away.
I literally went like this. I rubbed my hands together when you said leathery. Yep.
So these are when we use emotional language, we use sensory language, talk about, we can say, I walked in and the room smelled like my grandmother's house. What are you smelling right now? You're probably smelling pies and cakes and whatever, Smell is one of the biggest triggers of memory. Now, there's a reason why we're doing this, not just to light up brains, but it's also because when we light up the brain, what we're doing is we're creating a memory trigger. Because what our brains are both associative and predictive, and storytelling can actually address both of those things. So what we want is an association for them to remember what we're saying. So when we say he has rough, leathery hands, and then we go on to tell a story about how our product actually helps to remove the hard work, now we've got a memory association. What stories also do, because our brain always likes to be just slightly into the future, it's always predicting what's coming next. So when you're telling a good story, a story where there is a logical flow to it, our brain is engaged going, oh, I think he's going to go here. I think he's going to go there. So we use a framework we call the story spine. And the thing that I like about the story spine, and I've kind of altered it, is not mine. You can find it anywhere online, but I've altered it because I've learned so much about the brain science of storytelling. And what I love about the story spine is that it's only 5 steps to storytelling, and it can be imbued with a lot of these more scientific aspects of storytelling that actually help people to remember and to create this prediction. So there's really just 5 elements. One is the environment. Where's the story taking place? So it's the sense of place. So first of all, this forces you into the story, not outside of it telling the story. So be there, feel it. Where are you? I'm sitting in a boardroom and I can smell stale coffee and hear the chatter in the background. We're all there with you, right? So you want to bring the person in. Next is characters. Who's in the story with you? Characters have names and they have backstories. They don't have to be long, but we want to identify them. So it's me and Brian. And what are we doing? Brian is this amazing podcast host that I met years ago, and he's teaching me something new. So now we know about me and we know about you, and we've got a little bit of a backstory, and we know where the story is taking place. Now, most people, when they start a story, they jump into the point of the story. The other day, this thing happened. Now, don't do that, right? So you start with the environment, you move to the characters, and the environment and characters tend to come up together for obvious reasons. Now we can move into the point. What's the reason you're telling this story? Now, that's an important piece, and we want to be careful about how we reveal the point, because the point, what we want is, first of all, the thing that was going on in that moment, okay? And then we want to create what I call a raising of the stakes. So that's point number 4. This is the tension point of the story. And this is what every good storyteller knows how to do. And this is what sets our brain on fire. Because what you want is you come into the point, here's what happened. And then you have that, I like to call it the and then moment. Raise the stakes. What happened? Okay. Now you can raise the stakes many times. You can keep that going and really get your audience sitting on the edge of their seat. And then the 5th piece is what happened? What was the outcome? So 5 easy steps: the environment, the characters, the issue or opportunity, the raising of the stakes, and the outcome. Now, when you're telling a story that has an idea inside of it, what you want to do is you want to go to that moment, that tension point when you raise the stakes and you know what your idea is. Because when you're telling a story, I call it an idea-centric story, because you have an idea that you want to put inside of it, you know your destination. Your destination is the idea. The story is the carrier for it. So what you're doing is you're building that story knowing you're going to an idea. So when you get to the moment of raising the stakes and you've got your audience sitting on the edge of their seat going, what happened? You transition to your idea. In that moment, what you've done is you've created a metaphor for your idea. And if you're doing that at the opening of a pitch or a presentation, you don't ever come back to that moment until you're ready to close the entire pitch or presentation. You keep the audience at bay. You go to other parts of the story. You might tell other things throughout that presentation, but you leave that place, that moment of tension, until you're ready to close it, because it's an emotional place that you can use as a technique to bring your audience right back to that moment, right at the close. And of course, at the close of any pitch or presentation, what you want is for them to remember why you just told them everything you just told them. And that story, that moment, brings them right back to that place. And then you reiterate that idea. So now they've got it cemented in their mind, everything you wanted them to know.
Wow. So there's the foolproof plan. Now, I'm going to give you a homework assignment. Maybe you can actually help us on this call, this podcast today, Andrea. So I'm going to lay the groundwork. Right now, you look at our corporate media across the board, right, left or right, trust is at an all-time low. And I'm going to give my personal bias in my diagnosis probably. I think part of the problem is that a lot of folks in the corporate media have a narrative that they want to tell versus telling the story of what's actually happening and the importance therein. So what can we do for both sides of the corporate media to get some trust back? Is it possible to get some trust back by leveraging storytelling techniques that do not lean one way or the other, do not lean politically left or politically right in you're trying to insert a narrative, but rather take the very boring, sometimes facts and figures, the stats and stuff that your average person's like, all right, I read the journal. All right, we're good. I'm going on for my day. Like I'm going to glance at the headlines, but we see the headline, it sparks something in us, to your point, that emotional trigger. And then I start reading it. And by the way, I've seen this for again, both sides of the political aisle. I'll read an article and I'll start out and it starts, it was a blustery day in the 100-acre wood. And I'm like, oh, okay, here we go. I know it's going to be one of those pieces where they're going to be telling a story and there's going to be their bias just right there. And it happens all the time. And for me, this is what I do. I stop reading it. I say, I don't want to read this anymore. I know what you're trying to do. So how can we help the corporate media learn from their mistakes with what you've taught us today to present information in a way that's compelling? It's not leading folks with a bias, but rather with the things they need to know, right? The compelling stuff that is important, but doing so in a way that does resonate. It does trigger those memory connections that you were speaking about. So people don't just read the news and then they go on, they're drinking their coffee and they just go about their day, forgetting what they read 10 minutes earlier. That it actually sticks. So when they're talking about inflation or whatever, right? And they go to the store and then they see that the prices at the grocery store and they're like, oh my God. And then they're like, oh, they talked about this in that story of the article I read earlier today. Like, how do we do that better?
Well, I think one of the challenges with doing that is that the corporate media has so undermined trust that you can't just build it back with a technique. That's the problem. And that's why when you're reading on a blustery day in the 100-acre woods, you're like, you're just telling me a story and I don't believe you. I don't believe you. Like, that's the problem. So I think there, as you were asking the question, I was really thinking about, okay, how could they do that? And I think there's two things that came to mind. One is, first of all, I think it can't be any of the people that we know today are doing it, right? Because you're not going to regain trust in people that you don't trust. No matter what they say to you, you've already, fool me once, like that's where you are. We all are, right? So corporate media has a lot to atone for in the world for where we are, because they've told us far too many mistruths. I won't go so far as to say that they've lied. Maybe they have, but what I do think they've done is they've misled us, and they've presented information in ways that have that we know simply are not conducive to the future we want. So right away, I don't think corporate media can come back from where they are. What I do think, though, is that we need people who are telling truths and who haven't been undermined by that whole world. And I think what we need is a collective voice that's building a vision for the future that we all collectively want. And it's not one voice that's going to do that. It is going to be many voices, but we all have to actually be adding our voice to that. So when somebody who is outside of that picks up and reads, if we start creating what is the future we want? We're so in the moment right now. We're forgetting that every moment today, every choice we're making today is defining future Andrea and future Brian, right? So we are making those choices right now. And so what if we actually were a whole lot more clear on it and perhaps brought other voices in with us so that the voices or the what we're seeing is something that actually makes sense. I work with thought leaders all the time and I see the future that they're creating. And that's what I want to, that was one of the reasons why I started Talk Boutique. I remember my very first year working in TED and I'd been working in advertising my entire career. I thought I was pretty plugged into what was going on in the world. And I remember that first year I was working with a scientist who was working on the Human Genome Project. This was in 2011, 2012. And I'd never heard of the Human Genome Project. And they were, at the time, they were looking at resequencing the DNA. And, why were they doing that? And when I started to understand what this whole thing was about, I was like, why isn't anyone telling us about this? This is pretty important stuff. This is what it means to be human here. And no one's even talking to us about it. And that was when I started to really understand that there was no one telling us the real, the good news story. They were telling us all the bad news stories. Oh, here's why we need to sequence the DNA because, if not, whatever. But they're not telling us that, like when we look at where we are today with gene sequencing and beyond, now we're into regenerative medicine. I mean, right now, I mean, and some of the people that we work with, because we work with a lot of regenerative medicine scientists, we've got brains in petri dishes right now, working brains. Now, why is that important? Well, because you can test drugs on working brains that will cure things like Alzheimer's or Parkinson's, or you can't do that in a human, but you can do it when you've created a little organette that is not a full brain. It's just a little organette, but it works. And it's the only way to see a working brain. So when coming back to your question, how do we actually change what we're listening to so that we can trust it? We all get involved in creating it, and we add our voices, and we don't accept corporate media. We start to turn against it. Like, I don't listen to the news ever because it's propaganda. It's propaganda. And so, when we turn away, when we actively say, you don't represent me, then we have the opportunity to create the truth that does represent us.
I mean, Andrea, I'm going to channel my inner Obi-Wan Kenobi here. That's why I'm here, right? Because I saw this and the writing was on the wall. I'm like, I see the left side of the aisle and the right side of the aisle, and they're presenting both of their narratives, but something's missing, right? There is this, dare I say, the common sense extremists out there who are just looking at the world and saying, this ain't right. And I know that whatever both sides are promoting as their truth, it definitely is neglecting a large portion of the truth. So let's start talking to folks. Let's start having folks like Andrea here on this show. And by the way, we've had so many folks across the board. I've had marketers, I've had engineers, I've had entrepreneurs, I've had scientists, I've had doctors. I mean, literally go through the list of guests here over the past 870 plus episodes. And we've had just some of the most incredible conversations in such detail that would never take place on your traditional corporate media, because they're looking for sound bites. They're not looking for solutions. And that is where I was so excited to be able to see podcasting become a medium that more and more folks could dip their toes into, because it really was a democratization of media. It gave us, the average person, a microphone on par with Chris Cuomo from CNN or Sean Hannity from Fox News, right? You don't have to be a blowhard to sit there and yell into a microphone to get your base riled up and get your sponsorships brought to you by Pfizer, brought to you by Boeing. And no, none of that. Let's talk about the real issues that real people talk about. And by the way, this is my final thought, and I'll turn things over to you. I want to go back to something you said, and I cannot echo it enough. The positivity. We need to have something to look forward to. I used to have a professor back in college, Dr. Twombly, you're the man. He used to say the evening news starts by saying, good evening, and then they proceed to tell you why it isn't. And if that is not exactly what we see on our headlines, on the TV, on the social medias, it's everywhere. It's doom and gloom. The ticker, the clock that's supposed to show us how close we are to doomsday. It's been 5 minutes of doomsday for like 50 years at this point. Yeah. So just everybody is exhausted with the constant anxiety of doom and gloom. They want something positive. They want something hopeful. And it's on us. Like, we know that the corporate media isn't going to give that to them. We need to be the change. And by the way, Andrea, that is exactly why we're having a conversation like we are today, because this is how we change the future, is by actually changing it. Exactly. Andrea, that's my final thoughts for today. What do you have for us in your as we wrap things up?
Well, thank you for what you're doing, Brian. And I couldn't agree more. I mean, the reality is it has never been more accessible to have a voice in this world. And that is what I stand for. I stand for creating voices in this world, using your voice, adding it to the future we are co-creating. Because when we, as those who are choosing to see the positive side, get together and co-create together, we will create a future that all of those naysayers can't even see coming. And that's the cool thing. We get to choose that. We get to create it. We get to think it. And so, thoughts become things. So so choose good ones. And that's how I live my life. So Brian, I love what you're doing. Thank you for being a voice in this world. Thank you for creating change. And anyone who's interested in learning more about how they can do that, I'm happy to have a discussion with them on how we might support them in building their voice and being, what I call an everyday thought leader. Because I think thought leaders, we tend to think of, media or presidents or, leaders of industry as the thought leaders. But the reality is we all have the ability to be a thought leader. And so when we take thought leadership and take that big distance thing out of it, and we recognize that I can be a thought leader in my family, I can be a thought leader in my community, I can be a thought leader at my kids' school. When we do that, what we do is we inspire others to do the same. And when we all stand up, there's way more of us than there are of those who are telling us the world is going to hell in a handbasket. And I don't believe that. I know I've seen what work is going on in this world, and I am so hopeful for the future that we are creating together. And I say, come join us.
Hear, hear. All right, Andrea, you gave us the call to action. If folks would like to continue to learn more about storytelling, they should reach out. But a crucial part's missing there. Where can folks go ahead, continue the conversation, email, social media, hit us with it?
Yeah, so you can follow me on LinkedIn. I'm there live every day doing my thought of the day. You can visit our website, talkboutique.com, and or email me at andrea@talkboutique.com. So love to hear from you. Follow me also on YouTube, the Thought Leader Academy on YouTube.
Andrea Sampson, it has been an absolute pleasure. I have truly enjoyed this conversation, and I know my audience quite well. I know they enjoyed it because I get this quite a bit. Brian, I love the show. Sometimes you're a little bit more in the world of politics. Sometimes you're in the world of business. Sometimes you're in the world of public policy or just what's happening, like current events. And this episode literally brings all of it together. It shows how everything is connected, because too often people just kind of get siloed, right? They have their tunnel vision. They have their problems they have to deal with. I get it. But this hopefully will help bring things together, show you not just how to talk about these ideas, but specifically giving you the blueprints to have real success, to have your ideas turn into action. Talk Boutique, Andrea Sampson. It has been an absolute pleasure. Folks, if you enjoyed today's episode, links are all going to be in the show notes. So please go ahead, reach out to Andrea. Let her know you heard her over on her appearance on the Brian Nichols Show. I know she'll definitely love that, and I love that as well. And other than that being said, follow yours truly on social media. You can find me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram at B Nichols Liberty. As for the podcast, you can find it on your favorite podcasting platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Music, and more. If you're more of a video person, you like to watch your content, head over to YouTube, Rumble, Twitter, Facebook, wherever it is you like to watch video content. You can watch the Brian Nichols Show in all of its entirety. Now, by the way, we do have over 870 episodes. So if you're like, I wonder if Brian's talked about X. Probably not Twitter X, actual like blank conversation, but we did talk about X at one point. Don't worry. So go ahead, go to briannicholsshow.com, go to that little search bar, search any of the topics we have. Again, all of those episodes over on the homepage. You should be able to find any topic you want to dig into. And again, we've had literally hundreds of guests, much like Andrea here on the show, talking about these issues in very much long form. And you're going to get a lot more value listening to those episodes than you would listening to some talking head on the corporate, 3-letter TV channel on the evening news. So what's our goal here at the Brian Nichols Show? Andrea, you'll like this. Educate, enlighten, and inform. That has literally been the entire outcome of today's episode. And I'm just so thankful to have you on the show, Andrea. So with that being said, any final words as we wrap things up? Anything you wanted to leave the audience with today?
Well, like I said, thoughts become things, so choose good ones. And Brian, thank you for everything that you are doing. The world is better because of it. So I have so enjoyed today's conversation, and I look forward to the next one. You take care.
Likewise, Andrea, the feeling is 1000% mutual. So thank you for joining us. And one final plug, folks, that is to please support the folks who support us. That is our amazing studio sponsors like Cardio Miracle. Also our other sponsors like Amp America, Peebles, CBD, Liquid Freedom, Energy Tea, and more. All those amazing sponsors found over on briannnicholsshow.com. Hey, either way, just use code TBNS at checkout. Some special discount or gift will be applied at checkout. One more time, code TBNS. That's all we have for you for today. So with that being said, Brian Nichols signing off here on the Brian Nichols Show for Andrea Sampson from Talk Boutique. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Brian Nichols Show. Find more episodes at briannicholsshow.com.